All right, let's get into it. Today, we're diving into one of the most unbelievable, and yet completely true, stories to come out of the Second World War. It's the story of a Syrian brown bear who was, and I mean this literally, enlisted in the Polish army, served in combat, and even earned the rank of corporal. I mean, it sounds like something straight out of a movie, doesn't it? A wild animal right there on the front lines, fighting alongside soldiers. It pushes the limits of what you think is possible. So the question is, could a bear really fight in World War II? And the answer is a resounding, absolute yes. In the middle of one of the most ferocious and bloody battles of the entire war, a bear named Wojtek didn't just fight, he became a legitimate hero. Okay, so let's dive right into the heart of the action. We're starting at the Battle of Monte Cassino, May 1944. This is the place where Wojtek truly cemented his legend. So you have to picture the scene. It was grim. The 22nd Company had this critical and incredibly dangerous job of hauling ammunition and supplies up these steep, treacherous hills, all while under constant enemy fire. The noise of artillery was just deafening. And look at the weight of these things, 45 kilograms each. That's a heavy lift even for two men. Now, Wojtek was initially terrified by all the noise, which makes sense, but then he just started watching his friends, watching them struggle with these boxes. And one day, he just walks up, stands on his hind legs, and holds out his paws. The soldiers, completely amazed, gave him a crate, and he just carried it. From that moment on, he worked right alongside them, and he never, ever dropped a single box. But wait a minute. How does a Syrian brown bear end up hauling ammo in Italy for the Polish army? Well, to get that, we have to rewind the clock 2 years, to a roadside in Iran. It's an incredible story about a group of soldiers who had lost everything and then found a kindred spirit. So these Polish soldiers had just been released from Soviet gulags. They were exhausted, they were thousands of miles from home, and they'd seen the absolute worst of humanity. And then they see this kid with a sack. Inside is this tiny orphaned bear cub, and they knew right then and there they had to save him. They named him Wojtek, which is a classic Polish name meaning smiling warrior, and they started nursing him back to health with condensed milk from an old vodka bottle. And the price for this future war hero? It wasn't exactly a king's ransom. For a little bit of food and a few trinkets, the Polish army got its most unique and, you could argue, its most famous recruit. Now listen, Wojtek wasn't just some mascot they kept in a cage. No way. He was officially enlisted. He was given a rank, a paybook, a serial number, the whole shebang. He literally became one of the lads, sharing their tents, their food, and all their chaotic adventures across the Middle East and into Europe. And he developed this incredible human-like personality. He loved to wrestle with the other soldiers, he loved riding shotgun in the military trucks with his head sticking out the window, and get this, he developed a real taste for beer, which he drank right out of the bottle. Oh, and he had this really weird habit of eating lit cigarettes. He wouldn't touch them unless they were lit for him first. And this really speaks volumes about his nature. You know, he grew into this massive, incredibly powerful bear, but he seemed to understand that these wrestling matches were just a game. When he inevitably pinned his opponent, which he always did, the fight would end with him just licking their face. His antics led to one of the most legendary stories of the entire war, so Wojtek was obsessed with taking showers. One night, he sees the bathhouse doors open and wanders in, looking for a wash. And who does he find hiding inside? An Arab spy who was planning to steal weapons. The spy, well, you can imagine, comes face to face with a full-grown bear in a tiny room, screams his head off, and surrenders on the spot. Wojtek's reward for his amazing counterintelligence work? A bottle of beer and all the shower time he wanted. And it turns out, having a friendly bear as your best friend is a fantastic way to break the ice. The soldiers quickly figured out that Wojtek was a magnet for local women. They'd take him to parties, and pretty soon they had the perfect excuse to start a conversation, all by introducing their very unusual friend. Let's just pause on this for a second. We are not talking about a teddy bear here. At his peak, Wojtek weighed around 230 kilograms, that's over 500 pounds, and stood well over 1.8 meters, or 6 feet tall. This was an incredibly powerful animal who just happened to think he was a Polish soldier. So the war ends, but for the Polish Second Corps, there was no free Poland to go home to. The country was now under Soviet control. So Wojtek and his entire unit were relocated to a displaced persons camp in Scotland. And of course, his fame followed him. In Scotland, Wojtek was an instant celebrity. The local people, the press, they were all completely captivated by the story of this soldier bear. He was even made an honorary member of the Polish-Scottish Society. He was the star of the show. But this life of freedom couldn't last forever. The army was being demobilized, his comrades were starting new lives, and you can't exactly take a 500-pound bear with you. They were faced with an absolutely heartbreaking decision, a decision that would tragically shrink his entire world. And so we get to the final, really bittersweet chapter of Wojtek's life, his transition from a soldier, living free among his friends, to a symbol, living behind bars, but never, ever forgotten. You see, demobilization is a standard process after a war. But what do you do with a bear who's officially on the army's books? You can't release him into the Scottish wilderness. He wouldn't survive. He was a soldier, but there was no civilian life for him to go back to. Now, his comrades had offers, even from Polish zoos, but they refused. They absolutely would not allow Wojtek, who was a symbol of their fight for free Poland, to become a propaganda piece for the communist government they opposed. So, on November 15, 1947, these tough, hardened soldiers openly wept as they led their friend onto a truck for the very last time, taking him to the Edinburgh Zoo. But that bond, it was never broken. His old army buddies visited him for years. Zoo staff were probably horrified to see these men climbing over the barrier and into his enclosure, not to be attacked, but to be embraced and to have one last friendly wrestling match. Visitors even said that in his old age, Wojtek would perk up and become animated whenever he heard people speaking Polish nearby. I think one of his fellow soldiers really summed it up perfectly. Wojtek was so much more than a pet, so much more than a mascot. In a time of unimaginable loss and displacement, he was a connection to home, he was a source of joy, and a symbol of their resilience. He was their brother in arms. Wojtek passed away in 1963, but his story lives on in statues in Poland and Scotland, and it leaves us with this thought. In the middle of all the dehumanizing chaos of war, the story of a bear who became a soldier shows us the incredible and sometimes very strange ways that humanity, friendship, and hope can not only survive, but thrive.